Yeah.
And I think it has to do with this not being able to acknowledge what's formless.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yep. God, you're a good teacher to yourself. All you need to do is start listening to yourself.
I listen to myself all day long.
Not in the way that I'm thinking. You just gave yourself your spiritual practice and orientation. Are you aware of that? You just gave it to yourself.
Yeah, I figured you'd say something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's better than anybody else can give you, right? Let me just kind of give you a little reflection back to make sure you don't miss it, right? I need to acknowledge. You've heard me talk about the practice of acknowledgement during this retreat, I imagine. I've mentioned it several times of how powerful the practice of acknowledgement is. That which you knew yourself to be during that awakening is still present. You are still that emptiness. Acknowledge it, which means give it your attention. Don't try to grasp it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to do anything with it. Just intuitively acknowledge it, but only over and over and over and over and over. Acknowledge it. Oh, okay. That's what I have experienced myself to be. Okay, let me take a moment to be that knowingly. Let me just let that sink in for a moment. And then you get lost in some thought or some confusion or whatever it is.
In an instant.
Okay, in an instant you get lost. Okay. So, guess what I'm going to say?
Come back.
Acknowledge again. Not grasp at it, and try to own it, but acknowledge. So that's the foundation. I'm going to get to the second, what else you're bringing here too. I'm not suggesting that's the only thing, but without that, the rest is you're just going to spin in circles, because the rest is you'll just be in a sort of an unconscious denial of what you yourself have already recognized, right? Why the hell chase after an awakening you've already had, for God's sake? What's the use of that? Right? Can it deepen? Is there maybe more to it than you've seen? Sure there is. But you realize that by acknowledging what is present rather than endlessly looking for what isn't. That's the thing that's useful to know. Right? It doesn't mean you got to pretend like, oh, I know everything and I'm totally clear and I'm Mr. Enlightenment and all of that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you put on some enlightenment stance. I'm just saying just a simple inner acknowledgement. I was gifted. I was graced. I was shown what I am. Perhaps I better get on with the business of acknowledging it and appreciating it. Let me start there. Let me not keep denying it, even though I get lost 100 times in maybe an hour or 10 minutes.
Even though it's not a thing.
Even though it's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. And by doing that, that true nature just starts to become more stable, it just starts to deepen. And the confusions start to clarify themselves. Because this is what's happening to you, and it happens to almost everybody. A real awakening is like going, I'm not saying we go to an end point in the sense of some total and complete depth of knowing, but it's almost like going from A to Z. Here I am, a normal, ordinary guy walking down the street, for God's sake, and boom, and then boom, all that's just swept away in the snap of a finger, and I'm nothing. A to Z, right? And when you're at Z, it feels like, well, this is so obvious. Number one, how did I ever miss it? And I couldn't possibly ever not know this. Like, this is impossible. This is the most obvious damn thing that could ever happen. But then curiously, you find yourself back at like C. Right? How the hell did I get back here? Right? No! Right. And it's not so damn obvious anymore. Like, right? Now, how the hell did that happen? So often the first time is like this gift, boom, A to Z. And then almost everybody boomerangs back somewhere, right? It's different for everybody. You boomerang back somewhere, and then you sort of trace that trajectory that you leapt over in a single instant, bit by bit. But what really helps the tracing of that trajectory bit by bit, what really helps it is to know that all along the way, actually, what you saw at Z is still with you all along the way. It's more in a seed form. It's more obscure. It's more subtle. It takes more of your attention to be in the knowing of it, but nonetheless, it's still there. So it's like the end point is with you all along the journey to the end point that you've already been at. But you go through the journey anyway. That's the trajectory. Leap over it all, boomerang back, and then you're trajecting this thing. And as you do this, the tendency is you convince yourself that you've lost something that you actually haven't. That's why I asked you what I ask everybody who it seems to me, because not everybody that thinks they have an awakening has had an awakening, but if it seems like they have to me, then I always ask them the question, what about that, what you saw and knew yourself to be is still with you now? And I ask them that because I want to reorient them to that which they haven't lost. And granted, it's subtle and it's easily confused. But let's together come out of lying to ourselves that anything is actually completely lost, because it's not. And it never will be.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my friend.